Very astute observations. As I would expect, you're having experience in trade negotiations and in services. Let's go a little deeper on some of the issues you raised. Let's maybe look at the digital transformation issues that the next panel will explore. We've seen in the pandemic, experts in both trade and telecommunications have observed that it has accelerated digitization of business and business models, not only what our people are doing online. And consequently, this has accelerated the uptake, as Bernard noted, in ICT and ICT-enabled trade. In your view, what does this imply for the recovery of trade in essential services such as finance, logistics, transport, as well as for the resilience of trade in goods and services overall looking forward?
Thank you very much. This is a very big question. I try to respond to the extent possible. We can see the evidence of the accelerated digitalization in our personal life and also in our professional lives. This has also impacted also in the Asia-Pacific region, while sectors such as tourism, logistics have been hard hit. Other services in the digital sphere, such as telecommunications and digitally traded services, have excelled and met the challenge. So what we have seen is not only resilience of digitalized services during the pandemic, but also an acceleration of digital platforms and services throughout economies and into sectors that were not traditionally relying on as much on digital services. So essential services such as finance, logistics, you mentioned, will already depend heavily on digital technology, and that helped them through this. At the same time, as ramped up, much of this adaptation of business and traders is expected to become permanent, leading to overall reduction in trade costs. I expect that the trend will contribute to sustainable business and trade expansion. Thank you.
Ambassador, let's look at your real strength in being with us today. Let's talk about the WTO and the GATS, in which you're a longtime expert in particular. Do you believe that the features of the WTO offer support for recovery and resilience from the pandemic and beyond the pandemic? For example, how do the rules on foster digital trade and competitiveness?
Well, thank you very much. I think this the role of the trade rules and trade commitments, like in the WTO, has been sort of receiving more and more good understanding these days. And the while I was in the Geneva, as Lee said, around 1998, actually we were starting a robust discussion on e-commerce. And at that time, there was a question about this trade or e-commerce. Does this really fit in the WTO framework, or is it supposed to be a kind of third category, not good or not in services? And I think part of this discussion is still going on, but at that time it was clear, and that's actually been codified in a sense by the dispute settlement process by panel reports, is that actually the commitments in the services, it should be interpreted as the technologically neutral. So this is a very important principle. And that means when our society is going to become more digitalized, the cross-border, for example, cross-border services trade commitments can be in principle applied. Those commitments apply to digital trade. And so this is very important interpretation of the WTO. And that means the rules and the commitments of the WTO really create stability and predictability for business environment. So I think I'd like to emphasize this is the meaning of this is getting more important compared with 1998, even particularly after the COVID situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You know, considering where you sit, you mentioned that there is some rulemaking underway in Geneva, for which there are some high hopes on the part of some members. What is your take on the WTO work and the new rules that would be relevant here? Can you tell us anything? How much can you tell us about the current state of play in Geneva on some of the new rulemaking issues?
Well, thank you very much, Lee. I think I covered some of the developments in work on domestic regulation in my remarks earlier. To provide more details on e-commerce, also known as digital trade, I can safely say that the participating members aim to advance work as much as possible by MC12. They may not be able to conclude it, but they are expecting substantial development to the extent possible. They have achieved good progress so far as well, and on the plurilateral setting, and the participants have produced clean text for a number of provisions and stabilized a text on transparency. Participants also engaging on issues such as data flows, data localization, source code, and customs duty electron transmissions. Some of those are quite difficult, but they are very much willing to continue to work on these provisions. They anticipate that the outcome will facilitate cross-border electronic commerce and contribute to realizing the opportunities that digitalization offers for inclusive growth that benefit not only for big companies, but also for small and medium-sized enterprises. Thank you.
Yes, Ambassador, I think we were both around at the WTO in 1998 when this started, and I think a recurring theme over the years has been, you know, how e-commerce, we hope, will help SMEs. So that's not been lost on members, I don't think. We hear both trade people, we hear trade people and we hear other experts in services say that it seems as though sometimes policymakers don't give enough emphasis to services. Maybe it's not well understood by some of the trade people outside of the services community. How do you think we can encourage policymakers to give a higher priority, more emphasis to services trade and to services negotiations as well?
Thank you very much. Again, compared with several decades ago, like 1998, I think there has been a great improvement for the policymakers, politicians, business people in understanding concept of trading services and also importance of trading services. But we think we should do more. And I think the people attending this event, listening to these events, are the really people who can do that. And we'd like to encourage everyone to encourage the policymaker around you to demonstrate this is an important sector. And this is a very key sector for the recovery and creating resilience after the pandemic. So in this sense, this APEC roadmap and business advisory council activities, including this event, are very much important event, and a very good example here. And we'd like to encourage further to push these kind of things. And you have to really emphasize the importance of services, not just important services and business, but actually the important services environment, which is created by the legal stability of international arena, like the GATS and also RTAs as well. But I think there are a lot of development in the particular APEC areas like TPP or RCEP, bilateral, and many of them include a very high level of rules and commitments of services. But I think if you want to have a really inclusive and good environment for doing business, because business is being done on a global basis, I think it is very important to upgrade the commitments and upgrade the rules of the WTO under the GATS. So I'd like to encourage to support the WTO activities, and the Asia Pacific region is a very vital area, and the services playing not just services alone, but services playing a supporting role in manufacturing and making important part of global and regional value chain. So I think Asia Pacific region has the ability and the knowledge of promoting global services rules upgrading. Thank you so much.
Ambassador, I strongly agree that Asia Pacific region will be very important, especially because it's a time when the WTO needs supporters. It needs strong supporters. It also needs brokers to help reach the compromises that we need to reach to reform the system and to move forward in negotiations. And I thank you very much for your insights. I'm so glad you could be here today. You're the perfect person to be with us and in this event.